I find that the process of facilitating is actually much richer when you yourself are in process at the same time. A lot happens during that time. Part of it is developing that ability to be at the same time more present with yourself as you are present with the client. It's not one or the other. Essentially, creating a space, it's about finding a way to be more in connection with yourself and with the client and figuring out how to adjust moment by moment. So I give two courses that are in some ways similar because both of them do that, but there is a different emphasis in each one. This one is about the mindful and proactive edge of focusing-oriented therapy. The other one is about embodied and relational edge of focusing-oriented therapy. So ideally, you'd take both, but you can take each one separately. It's fine. And the idea is actually to give you time to be in that spirit, in that environment, so that the process is more ingrained and is more second nature.
I'm wondering about the focusing process.
What we are doing is we're not teaching people focusing. In fact, the clients may never know that you do focusing. You feel free to tell them or not tell them. What we're doing is we're inspired by focusing, by what it means, and I will talk a little bit about it, to create an environment in which we help clients get out of their own way and have a creative relationship with their problems, with their inner self, with their best selves, that makes it possible for them to deal with their problems in a different way and to grow. Okay, so we're not teaching them focusing. Yes, as a result, they kind of get to know it, but they don't have to. What we're teaching them is a way of being. And we're teaching them not so much in terms of, okay, here's what you do, 1, 2, 3, but we're teaching them by our way of being with them, which creates a space. So in the beginning, focusing was quote unquote invented by Jin Gendlin. Jin Gendlin didn't start by saying, I want to find focusing. He was curious and said, what is it that makes some therapies more successful than others? And he thought it was going to be about this technique or that technique. And what he found is that actually it depended on the client, that the clients who had an ability to pause and reflect tended to have much more successful therapy than the others. So the essence, that's why, big part of me, I call it active pause, is essentially when you are involved in something, if you have the ability to, from time to time, pause, absorb what you have a little bit of an inner dialogue with it, then you absorb something. So it's something in which you get actively involved as opposed to being force-fed. Imagine that, and you don't have a chance to participate. So therapy clients, essentially are going to be gaining and benefiting from the corrective experience of therapy because they can actively get involved in it, which means they participate, and then they absorb what you're doing. Okay? And so in a nutshell, what we do is we behave in a certain way, including by, pausing ourselves, including by paying attention to how the client is absorbing things, pacing, connecting at a moment by moment level so as to make it possible for the client to have this kind of dialogue with experience that makes it possible for them to absorb experience. What you're doing is you create an experience, you create a surrounding where people can actually absorb experience and benefit from it instead of just experience floating by and they're not there. Okay, so that's why it's present, because what makes it present is the ability to actually take in experience moment by moment, have an inner dialogue with it, digest it, the same way as you chew on food, and then it can go into the body and it's integrated. Okay. So that's so of course we do talk about what focusing is. I'm not trying to say you can totally ignore it, but the key to me is understanding that principle of how it works and making it work for yourself and make it work in a way that you can offer it to your clients.
For me, what you're saying has a quality of almost slowing down. It feels like a permission to slow down, which is interesting because I'm fast. I am, when I'm in my, with my client, I often feel this sort of imperative, to act, on what is happening.
Being fast, there's nothing wrong with it. It could be that your mind is racing and you say, oh, I get it. This client is this and that. And so I would, far from me to say, don't do that. But, that sense of, okay, what is it for me, the therapist, if I have this brilliant insight, but I actually am able to keep it next to me? Like, what is it if I develop the capacity to hold it as opposed to running? What is it if I compare this insight to what is unfolding in the session? And so in a way, it's like the quality of presence is you might feel antsy. You might feel like, oh man, I want to rush. But what happens when you kind of control that? And so when you do that, you're in process. And as you're in process, you're actually creating a space by being in process in which you're active, as opposed to just being there and only the client is processing. So that's what we develop is the parallel process of paying attention to the client, paying attention to yourself, and the back and forth.
That's really, really useful. That holding the inside, because that's the thing, is it's almost become bare to be with it. You need to share it. But if you hold on, oftentimes the client actually gets there.
And it's good for the client, but it's also good because at that moment, you're not just paying attention to the client, you're also paying attention to your process. Okay? And so if you pay attention to your process, you have two human beings in process in the room, as opposed to an all-knowing therapist who has no problem and, which is not real.
Yes.
So it's like you have to be alive. And alive very much as you're dealing with the problems of the moment.
I guess otherwise you end up using the whole therapeutic process as a defense, right?
Yeah, but it's like the thing is, if you deal with yourself in a certain way, it's not you're not using the client's time for your benefit. You really are making the whole session more alive. And it's about being able in practicing the back and forth and noticing how the back and forth, your process feeds the client's process. And so, and that's also, very much like what focusing is in essence, instead of little technique of you do this and you do that, is that there is an inner resonance, And so that's what we do. And again, we could talk about it for a long time, but practicing it, is something that makes it, then you see it, you see somebody else doing it, you do it. Yeah, okay, it's not so difficult.
So some clients being in their body is terrifying. So I'm wondering if that sort of, is sort of part of the course as to whether can you do focusing with everyone? Is it for everyone?
Yes. For some clients, there is a trauma that makes it very difficult to connect with the body because the survival has been to cut off connection with the body because connection with the body brings back the experience of pain. So forcing feeling the body and being embodied on everybody would be criminal. What is really important is finding the connection that creates safety and in which progressively a more embodied experience can be felt. We all are embodied being. We have different relationships with our body. And so what it is about is making it possible for the relationship that you have with your body and the client has with their body to actually become progressively more present, more visible, more manageable, and to introduce the notion of agency in creating it. People who have been traumatized, essentially, it's because the experience of the body relates to the trauma that there is no agency, no control. So I would want to emphasize to these people, it's wonderful that you disconnect your experience of your body because that's how you gain control. And that's a wonderful thing because you need control, to survive. And then in the way that it works for them, progressively introduce way in which they have control of it and then can enjoy it.
And thinking about my clients who some are so disconnected with their corporal experience. And like, I can imagine myself, what are you sensing? And them saying, nothing. I'm not sensing anything.
Let's do a very brief role play in which you're one of your clients who is really bad at sensing and feeling. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm going to do it not in the sense of saying this is the way to do it, but simply to demonstrate that it's less complicated than it might seem if we try talking about it. Okay. And the general concept is I'm going to be doing my best to try and meet you where you are. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just give me a couple of words about the situation so that we have a context for this conversation with your client.
So you're saying like the context of what brings them to therapy?
I mean, for a given client, the moment where you're going to ask. So it could be this client I've been seeing for 3 years has a problem with this and that. And during this session, this is what's happening where I'm not quite sure how to introduce the.
Okay, terrific. So this is a client. She's in her 50s. She's going through a terrible divorce. She's being... and ultimately, she has a trauma history in terms of her mother was narcissistic. Probably her husband was probably NPD as well. And but she is convinced that she cannot have a meaningful life if she does not have a partner, if she does not have a man in her life. She is incomplete.
Good. And so let's talk about a moment where you would want to, what's happening, and that where you feel that it would be nice if I could get her to be a little bit more.
Yeah.
embodied.
So she'll say this. So I would say, if I were her, I would say something like, well, I can't stop thinking about it. I keep the same thought keeps going through my head. I'm not sleeping very well at night. That I just want somebody kind, somebody nice to share my life with. That's all I want.
Yeah. So let's say you hear that, you say, yeah, you just want somebody nice to share your life with. Okay, you just kind of, okay.
Yeah.
And presumably she nods.
Right. But how do I stop thinking about this all the time?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to stop thinking about it.
Well, let's do an experiment. Let's do an experiment right here. So, obviously, when, you think about it, all your energy goes into your head.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try and practice for a moment, putting your curiosity into noticing what's happening in your body
Okay.
when you do that.
Well, I mean, do you mean my muscles?
Anything. It could be your muscles, it could be your breathing, it could be tensions, it could be shaking, whatever it is you're noticing. Cold, hot.
Well, I feel the only thing I feel is like I feel tense right here on my
Hmm.
shoulder.
Great, great, great. So, what you just did right now is you moved your attention from your head to your shoulders. And so, if you're okay with it, we can continue a little bit. What's happening if you direct your attention a little more to the rest of your body? And you might want to breathe a little bit and follow your breath.
What do you mean follow my breath?
As if you could, say, just imagine that you're tracking your breath as it goes in your body and back out.
Yeah, maybe I think as I'm breathing, I'm feeling some tightness in my chest.
Great, wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, yeah. So is that okay to do that, by the way? How is it to have this little experiment with you, Ms. Client?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I was trying to think of how she would respond.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked you about what that meant about tracking your breath. So, yes, I see where that was really helpful.
Okay. So essentially, you're not getting into some kind of pre-imposed idea that of what the body is. And certainly not going into she should have a felt sense or anything of that nature. But there's simply the idea that actually it's about shifting attention and paying attention to what happens when you do, including when it's impossible to do it. Okay?
Right.
And so you stay. So in practice, this is, about staying with the experience as the experience is. But
Mm-hmm.
so when I describe it, when I say staying with the experience, it might sound esoteric. In practice, it's just something as simple as, okay, so what's happening when you do that? Is it okay to stay a little longer? Can we continue? Oh, you're not connecting to your body at all. How does it feel to not connect with your body? You're not
Mm.
feeling anything. Oh, wow. And how do you feel about that? And so, kind of staying with it in a very gentle way, so that the experience is something that the client can manage, but it opens up a sense of possibility.
I think I got a sense of the fact that this is not a technique or a tool as such that you were teaching. I think you mentioned it being something natural, like a way of being. And
Yes.
did I get that?
Yes, very much so. You could isolate it and describe it as a technique if you describe a certain intervention and what happens. But the spirit in which I see it is really more of getting into a connection with the client where there is a dance. And so you do what feels right. And so the what feels right is something you get to feel more comfortable doing the more you do it and the more you have feedback. And so that's why it's a very experiential course. So you have chances to do it and trust your instinct